Welcome back everyone to Data Science for Everyone. Today we're going to be looking at building an economics calculator with ES6 modules in JavaScript. Let's get started. So today we're going to explore how to apply JavaScript ES6 modules to solve economics related problems. So we'll be focused on creating up an economics calculator that can handle various equations commonly used in the field, such as calculating GDP growth rates, inflation rate, unemployment change. Now, by structuring our code utilizing ES6 modules, we're going to ensure that our application is maintainable and scalable. So let's do a little bit of a project overview. So first off, what we want here is to create up several modules, and you can see that many of them are right here. We have our growth GDP module, we're going to have an inflation rate module, we're going to have an unemployment change module. And actually, I forgot to make here a main.js module as well. And you can see that here as well. So what's going to go on here? Well, each of these are kind of self-explanatory. So we are going to have some UI for our economics calculator that is going to be in our index file. And so first off, let's actually go on and maybe create up our modules. And let's start off with the GDP growth module. So the growth rate is going to be calculated as a percentage increase in GDP from one year to the next. Okay, so that would be something like GDP. Well, actually, I can probably show you guys something right here. So, and I took a screenshot of a formula here. You guys can see it's GDP current minus GDP previous divided by GDP previous multiplied by 100. So let's go on and actually create up that formula here. So first off, we want to export, and we're just going to create up a function here called calculate GDP growth. And it's going to take current GDP, and it's going to take previous GDP. Okay, then it's going to return here our calculation, so our current GDP minus our previous GDP. That's going to be divided by our previous GDP multiplied by 100. All right, so that is the first function that we have there. And again, it's very simple. Again, exporting, so that's going to be obtainable through the module. Next one, we're going to create up an inflation module. And inflation rate is basically using the consumer price index with the formula of, it's very similar, it's our current CPI minus our previous CPI divided by our previous CPI. So it is actually the same equation that we have here, but we're going to be changing this out here as, whoops, we're going to want to change this out here to be the inflation rate. Okay, and we want here to change this to CPI. And we're going to change this here to CPI, CPI, CPI. And again, this is probably going to be relatively, we could have created up something like a sub-function or a class or something that creates up just a differences function, okay? But again, I just want you guys to see what we can use this for. Now, the next one is going to be simply the change in our unemployment rate. Okay, so in this instance, we're going to export our function here of calculate, and actually it's going to be in here unemployment change. Okay, and it's going to take the current rate and the previous rate here, and then it's just going to return the current minus the previous rates. Let me fix our return. All right, good. So the next thing we'd want to do is to build up a user interface. Okay, but I'm actually going to take a little bit of time. I like to kind of do my main JavaScript module first. okay, because we want to, I kind of like to write it up so that I kind of know what pieces I need to make. And again, that can just be maybe a little bit of my own uh, preference in that, but again, we'll go about it this way first, okay? So we can do import here, and we want our calculate GDP growth. And again, you can see here that it's automatically filling it in for me for our module GDP growth. Okay, we want to import in here our calculate our information, our inflation, and we want to do the same thing here for our unemployment change. Okay, so the next thing here is we want to build up, let's say, function binding for our GDP growth rate. Okay, so let's do document.get element by ID, and again here we'll call this what do we want this to do? Calculate GDP growth button. Okay, let's add an event listener here, and we're going to be listening for click. And from here, we want to create up a nice function. So let's go on and do that. So inside here, we're going to have comma. Function is not going to have a name. It doesn't need any parameters here. And it's going to be const current current GDP is equal to our document dot get element by ID here, and it's the current GDP, and then dot value. And then we're going to do the same thing for our previous GDP, and then we'll calculate the growth. So previous GDP is equal to our document dot get element by ID, previous GDP dot value. And this is actually supposed to be value. I don't know why it's saying that. We'll do value. Good. All right, now the last one in here is constant growth is equal to our calculate growth, and we have our current with our previous. And then we want to actually show our, have a little bit of an answer key in here. And so we can do something like document.get element by ID. We want GDP growth result dot inner text, and then we want this to be something like GDP growth rate, and then here we would actually have our growth. Okay, and now we're going to need to do very similar things, and I can actually, let me close this and I can zoom in for you guys a little bit. So now we're going to have to do similar things for each of these other functions. So our current inflation rate, our current calculate our unemployment rate. I'm going to do that really quickly so we can kind of speed up our time on this video. Okay, so I've gone on and I've added in the other two, one for inflation, one for unemployment, and I also added in this parse float because again, people may want to use decimal points. So let's go in and add those in to up here to our growth for GDP. So parse float, we're just going to add that in to both sides there. So again, that we can have our floats in there. and it's not going to cause us any issues. All right, good. So now that we have our main.js here, okay, so we have all of our elements in here. So we have all of these to create up our buttons. And actually, let's go on and make this one similar so that it kind of goes in with these previous ones. So let's call this let's just call this calculate GDP just to make it a little bit simpler here. And I'm also going to change up this one as well to be something like just GDP result, since I did the same thing with these as well. So, and let's talk about maybe one more piece that I added in here, and I think we need to probably add this as well to this growth calculation. Okay, we need to add this toFixed.to, and so then we can actually control the size of the decimal points there. So let's go on and leave it as that. Okay, so again, these are on click, and again here I just used arrow functions, and we can also make this one that way as well, just so that everything looks kind of kosher and all looks the same. Okay, so now let's go on and create up our UI. Okay. Whoops. So let's go over here and let's grab up our HTML. Let's go on and put in some boilerplate. And we're going to call this economics calculator for our title. And we'll do the same thing here for an H2 of economics calculator. And let's go on and put in our script to our main. Okay, and let's give in a couple div tags in here. One will be for each of our functions that we want. And let's give them maybe a header in each of these. So let's do H3 here, and this will be GDP growth rate. So let's put in an input in here for a number, and the name will be current GDP, and our ID will also be current GDP. And let's also keep a placeholder here for current GDP. And again, let's go on and put in another one in here for our previous as well. And previous. All right, the next thing that we want in here is a button. And we want this to just have ID, and I believe the ID we used was calculate GDP. Okay, and we'll put in here something to say like calculate GDP growth. Okay, and then we also need a place to actually stash the data once we've put it in, and that's our GDP result. So now let's go on and actually let's just go on and test this out really quickly so that we see that everything is working, at least for that one, and then I'll go through and I'll speed up the process here so we can have the others as well. So let's do python-m HTTP server, and again I will take this up. I don't have it over here, so let me pull it up. Our localhost 8000. All right, and so here we have our current GDP, so we can do 321.2534. There we go. We'll put in a couple more and we'll do something like that just for fun. Yep, and notice here we are, we are currently having an issue with our calculation. I click this and it's not going. So let's go on and see with our inspection tool if it's going to give us a hint here. And it says here inflation rate module file not found, and we have our unemployment change module. And again, our server responded with status 404 not found. So it is coming up and it's giving us an error because some of these do not exist. So let's go on and see what's happening there. So we seem to be having that issue. So let's go over to our main. Oh, and we see here actually we did not put the .js in each of these. All right, and so we should be able to go back now and refresh and calculate inflation event listener. All right, we'll deal with that here in a second, but let's just take something like this and do this to calculate. All right. Oh, and now notice here we're getting nan here. So there seems to be some issue with our calculation as well. So let's go back over and check and see what's going on. So we are looking in here to double check what has happened with our code. So let's go over here to our growth calculations and we want to kind of double check that everything seems to be running the way that it should be. So did we maybe have some issue with inputting the data? Did we have some issue with anything else? And let's take a look here. So we have our data get calculate GDP. We've added an event listener for on click. We have done the current GDP. We have parsed to the current GDP dot value. We have the same thing here. All right. Previous GDP, previous GDP. Okay. And maybe it needs to follow it all the way back. Did we do anything here that should mess things up? Let's double check here. Okay, we have calculate GDP growth. All right, let's check just to see if maybe it's messing with something like this. All right, there we go. So it did not like this. Why did it not like that? Okay, maybe I had a space in there or something. Okay, then we would eventually maybe want to have something to go on and fix that if we have a space or anything like that, but we won't deal with that now. So, all right, this seems to be working correctly. So now let's go on and add in the other groups to this. All right, let me close this down. I'll go over here. All right, so I'm going to really quickly speed through and add these in, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so I've gone on and I've added in the inflation portion as well as the unemployment rate. So now let's go on and take a look at these to see how things are rolling. So let's refresh. All right, so we have each of these now. Let's double check them with, and let's do a point. And our inflation rate would be something like, let's say 9, and let's do 11. And unemployment rate, something like this, calculate. Okay, so These seem to be working out quite well. Now notice here we have a percent sign because this is a percent, and actually we need to add in a percent as well for here because this is a percentage in growth, but we can fix that in at a later time. So what have we actually talked about here? So we've created up a functional economics calculator web application that leverages our ES6 modules for a clear separation of our concerns in maintainability. Now we can use this these calculate GDP growth rate, inflation rate, and changes to the unemployment rate directly in the web interface, making this an interactive tool for educational purposes, maybe for an economics lecture or something like that. Now we can also use these tools not only to organize code effectively, but we can also demonstrate modern JavaScript development. If you guys like this and you want more of this content, please comment, subscribe, and hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.